During a bustling summer day, dozens of beachgoers spotted unusual shimmering shapes floating near the shore. Curiosity turned to collective alarm as more shapes appeared, bobbing gently in the waves. Phones came out, pictures were snapped, and speculation ran wild amongst the sun-kissed crowd. When the truth behind these mysterious objects became clear, the mood on the beach shifted dramatically. "Daddy, look! What is that?" a little boy named Carson yelled as he shook his father's shoulder. Robert had fallen asleep on the beach, and he shielded his eyes from the sun as he slowly woke up. At first, he had no idea what Carson was talking about, but he soon noticed that everyone at the beach was panicking a little bit. And it was for a good reason. When Robert finally saw those things in the water, his eyes widened. He had never seen something like that before. He quickly got up and looked around, searching for Katrina, his daughter. He couldn't see her anywhere at first, but then he finally spotted her by the water. He had no idea what was going on, but he thought it was better to be safe than sorry. "Cat, get away from there!" Katrina didn't listen to him, though. She stepped into the water, stretching out her hand to touch one of the objects that had appeared. As she pulled her hand back again, she let out a blood-curdling scream that drew all eyes on her. But what had happened to Katrina? What were those things in the water? And what was going to happen next? Robert sprinted toward Katrina, and he already stood next to her only seconds later. "Are you all right?" "What happened?" he asked, but his daughter was crying too hard to speak, and the tears were streaming down her cheeks. Robert then took her hand to take a closer look at it, and he gasped when he saw it. "Oh no!" he exclaimed, carefully inspecting his daughter's little hand from every angle. It was completely black, just like those things that were floating in the sea. Without hesitating, Robert got on his knees and submerged Katrina's hand in the water, and he rubbed it, trying to wash the black stuff, whatever it was, off. It didn't work as well as he had hoped, but the blackness seemed to be getting less and less the more he tried to wash it off. A crowd had gathered around them, and people were taking photos and videos of Robert and Katrina, but no one offered to help them. Suddenly, they heard another hysterical scream. As all eyes turned in the direction of the scream, they saw another little boy standing in the shallow water, staring at his hand. He also appeared to have touched one of those objects in the sea, and the same had happened to his hand as to Katrina's. This boy's parents rushed over to him, and this was when panic swept through the crowd. Everyone started running around and yelling at each other. Most people quickly packed their stuff and left, not wanting anything to do with whatever was going on at this beach. But others, who were more curious, got as close to those objects in the water as they dared. Robert was one of the people in the latter category. He didn't understand why everyone was panicking so much. Yes, Katrina had touched one of the things, and yes, she was frightened, but she was fine. After checking her hand, he concluded that she was not in any pain, and there was nothing really wrong with her hand. He'd tried to explain this to the other beachgoers, but of course, no one would listen to him. A few minutes later, most of the beachgoers had left, and only some of them remained at the beach. Robert had instructed his kids to not get closer to the water anymore, just in case, while he went to take a closer look. Another man approached him, and he said, "In my whole life, I've never seen anything like this. Have you?" "No, never," Robert replied, shaking his head. "It's bizarre." The man squinted at the shimmering objects, his brow furrowed. "You think it's dangerous?" he asked, glancing at Katrina's blackened hand. Robert sighed. "I don't know. It's not hurting her, but it's freaky." They stood there, scanning the water, trying to make sense of it all. The man rubbed his chin, deep in thought. "Maybe we should figure out what they are," he suggested. Robert nodded, agreeing. As Robert and the man continued to talk, a few other curious beachgoers wandered over. One of them, an older woman with a sun hat, pointed at the objects and asked, "What do you think those are?" Another man, holding a camera, snapped a few pictures and said, "Maybe we can get closer, see if we can identify them." The group exchanged concerned glances, all equally puzzled by the mysterious shapes bobbing in the water. "Could be pollution," suggested the man with the camera. Or some weird sea creatures, the woman in the sun hat added. A teenager chimed in. Maybe it's from a shipwreck or something. Robert listened, weighing each theory. Whatever it is, it's definitely not normal, he said. They continued to brainstorm, their voices filled with a mix of fear and curiosity. Each new idea added to the growing list of possibilities, but no one had any definitive answers. We should call someone, the older woman finally said. Like the Coast Guard or something. Another person shook their head. What if it's nothing? We don't want to overreact. Robert glanced at Katrina, still holding her discoloured hand. Better safe than sorry, he muttered. The group debated, some advocating for immediate action, while others hesitated, unsure if it was necessary. The tension grew as they weighed their options, the mysterious objects still bobbing ominously in the sea. In the end, they couldn't reach a consensus. Let's give it a little more time, someone suggested. See if anything changes. Robert sighed, feeling uneasy but unsure what else to do. The group slowly dispersed, each person lost in their thoughts, pondering the strange occurrence. The beach, once filled with laughter and joy, now felt tense and uncertain. Robert looked out at the water, the shimmering objects still floating there, and wondered what they meant for them all. The beach patrol showed up quickly, their vehicles skidding to a halt on the sand. Officers jumped out, setting up barriers with practiced speed. Robert watched as they cordoned off the area, directing the remaining beachgoers away from the water. "Stay back!" one officer shouted. Their faces were serious, adding to the tension. The beach, once a place of relaxation, now felt like a crime scene. Robert held Katrina close, unsure of what was happening next. "Everyone needs to leave now!" an officer barked through a megaphone. "This area is off limits!" The crowd murmured in confusion, but the urgency in the officers' voices left little room for argument. "But what's going on?" someone called out. "No questions, just go," the officer replied firmly. Robert grabbed their belongings, urging his kids to follow. The once crowded beach was quickly emptying, people hurrying away with anxious glances back at the cordoned-off area. Just as the last few beachgoers were leaving, local news teams arrived, cameras and microphones at the ready. "What's happening here?" a reporter asked, approaching an officer. "No comment," the officer replied, blocking the camera's view. "We just want to understand," the reporter started, but the officer cut them off. "You need to leave now," he insisted. The news teams, though persistent, were turned away, left to film from a distance, capturing the growing mystery. The patrol's refusal to provide details only fueled the crowd's anxiety. "Why won't they tell us anything?" a woman asked, frustration in her voice. "What are they hiding?" another added. Robert could hear the buzz of conversation around him, each theory wilder than the last. The officers remained tight-lipped, their silence creating an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. The shimmering objects in the water continued to float, an ominous presence that no one could explain. Despite the protests, the beach was cleared with surprising efficiency. The officers maintained a strict perimeter, ensuring no one lingered. "Move along, please," they repeated, guiding the stragglers away. Robert and his kids made their way to the parking lot, glancing back at the now empty beach. The patrol kept a close watch, their presence a stark reminder of the day's strange events. As they reached the car, Robert felt a mix of relief and lingering worry. When Robert and the kids got home, Lucy was pacing by the front door. "What happened? Are you okay?" she asked, rushing to hug them. Robert nodded, trying to reassure her. "We're fine, but it was crazy." Lucy looked at Katrina's hand, her face filled with concern. "What is that?" she asked, pointing at the blackened spot. "I'll explain everything," Robert said, guiding them inside. Lucy's anxiety was palpable, but she was glad to have them home safe. Sitting down at the kitchen table, Robert began to recount the day's chaotic events. "It started with these weird shapes in the water," he explained. Lucy listened intently, her eyes widening as he described the beach patrol and the evacuation. And then they made everyone leave without telling us anything, he finished. Lucy shook her head, still processing the story. That's so strange, she said. Do you think it's dangerous? Robert shrugged, unsure. I really don't know. Lucy examined Katrina's hand carefully, relief washing over her when she saw no lasting harm. It doesn't hurt? She asked Katrina. The little girl shook her head. No, Mummy, it's fine now. Lucy sighed, her worry subsiding a bit. Thank goodness, she murmured. Robert gave her a reassuring smile. I think it was just some kind of strange residue, he said, but we should keep an eye on it just in case. Lucy nodded, feeling a bit calmer. With the initial worry easing, the family began to settle down. Lucy helped the kids wash up, scrubbing the day's grime and salt water from their skin. Let's get you cleaned up, she said gently. The kids, still buzzing with leftover excitement, chatted about the day. Those things were so weird, Carson exclaimed. Yeah, really weird, Katrina agreed. Robert leaned against the doorway, watching his family with a sense of relief. The chaotic day was finally winding down. As the evening drew to a close, the family gathered for a quiet dinner. The earlier tensions slowly melted away as they enjoyed their meal together. This is nice, Lucy said, smiling at Robert. He nodded, feeling the same. It really is. The kids' chatter filled the room, their energy finally settling. The strange events of the day seemed distant now, replaced by the warmth of home. It was a comforting end to an otherwise unsettling day. Later that night, Robert searched online for any news about the beach incident. He scrolled through countless articles but found nothing. This doesn't make sense, he muttered, frustration growing. He checked local news sites, social media, even obscure forums, but there was no mention of the strange objects or the beach evacuation. How can something so big not be covered? He wondered aloud. The lack of information left him feeling uneasy and determined to find answers. Determined to uncover the truth, Robert decided to revisit the beach the next day. I need to see if anything's changed, he told Lucy. She looked worried, but understood his need for clarity. Just be careful, she warned. With a nod, Robert grabbed his keys and headed out. The drive to the beach was filled with anxious thoughts. Maybe I'll find something that explains it all, he hoped, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Arriving at the beach, Robert was greeted by new restricted area signs posted everywhere. What now? He muttered, parking his car. The signs were bright and unmistakable, warning everyone to stay away. This wasn't here yesterday, he thought, scanning the area. Despite the clear warnings, Robert's curiosity and need for answers pushed him forward. I have to know what's going on, he decided, heading towards the beach with determined steps. Ignoring the restricted area signs, Robert proceeded past the barriers. I can't just leave without knowing, he said to himself. The beach was eerily quiet, the usual sounds of laughter and waves replaced by an unsettling silence. His heart pounded as he moved closer to the water, scanning for any signs of the previous day's events. There has to be something, he thought, pushing forward despite the uneasy feeling in his gut. To his surprise, the beach appeared untouched and normal. The mysterious objects were gone, and there were no signs of the chaos from the day before. How is this possible? Robert wondered, walking along the shore. The water lapped gently at his feet, giving no hint of the previous disturbance. It was as if nothing had happened at all. Did I imagine it? He questioned, looking around in disbelief. The beach seemed to have erased all evidence. Robert stood on the beach, feeling a chill run down his spine. The place was eerily quiet, completely devoid of the mysterious shapes from the day before. Not a single person was around, and the only sound was the gentle lapping of waves. This can't be right, he muttered to himself. The beach, usually full of life, now felt ghostly and abandoned. The absence of any activity made him question the reality of what he'd seen. Determined to find answers, Robert meticulously inspected the area. He walked along the shore, searching for any sign of the previous day's chaos. There were no strange objects, no black residue, nothing out of the ordinary. How could everything just disappear? He wondered aloud. He checked the sand, the water, even the nearby rocks, but found no trace of what had caused the panic. It was as if the entire incident had been wiped clean. Robert's search was interrupted when he noticed a solitary figure standing afar. The person was just a silhouette against the horizon, barely moving. "Who's that?" Robert squinted, trying to get a better look. The figure stood still, watching the ocean. Robert felt a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Maybe they know something, he thought, deciding to approach. As he moved closer, the figure didn't budge, adding to the mystery of their presence. Approaching cautiously, Robert prepared to engage the stranger. "Hello?" he called out, trying to sound friendly yet assertive. The figure turned slightly, acknowledging his presence but remaining silent. Robert took a deep breath and continued. "Were you here yesterday? Did you see what happened?" The person, now clearly a man, gave a small nod. Robert felt a surge of hope. "Can you tell me anything about those objects?" he asked, eager for any information. The man appeared reticent, offering only cryptic warnings. "They come and go," he said softly, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "What do you mean?" Robert pressed. The man shook his head. "This isn't the first time. It won't be the last." Robert's frustration grew. "Can you be more specific?" The man finally looked at him, his gaze intense. "Be careful. Some things are best left alone." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Robert with more questions than answers. Robert hurried after the man, hoping to get more answers. "Wait, please, I need to understand," he called out. The man paused briefly, but his expression remained unreadable. "I've told you all I can," he said quietly, before turning away again. Robert tried one last time. "Is there anyone else who knows about this?" The man simply shook his head, refusing to offer more details. Frustrated, Robert watched as the man walked further away, disappearing into the distance. Robert stood there, feeling a mix of frustration and confusion. The man's swift departure left him with more questions than answers. "What's really going on here?" he wondered aloud. He watched the man until he was completely out of sight, hoping he might turn back and say more. But he didn't. With a heavy sigh, Robert turned back to the sea, the waves now seeming more mysterious than ever. The cryptic encounter only deepened the mystery. Left alone, Robert sat down by the sea, contemplating the man's ominous words. "They come and go," he repeated to himself, trying to make sense of it. The calmness of the ocean contrasted sharply with the turmoil in his mind. What did the man mean? And why was he so secretive? Robert stared at the horizon, the unanswered questions swirling in his head. He felt a strange mix of curiosity and unease, unsure of what to do next. Back home, Robert continued his online searches for any news or updates about the beach incident. He scoured local news sites, forums and social media, but still found nothing. "How can there be no information?" he muttered, growing increasingly frustrated. He even tried different keywords and search phrases, hoping to uncover something new. Despite his efforts, the lack of news only heightened his curiosity and concern. The silence from official sources was deafening and suspicious. As days passed, Robert's curiosity grew, overshadowed by the lack of personal connection to the events. He felt a nagging need to understand what had happened, even though he wasn't directly affected. "Why can't I let this go?" he wondered. He continued to think about the cryptic man and his warnings. The mysterious objects, the beach patrol, and the secrecy gnawed at him. Robert knew he had to dig deeper, despite the lack of clear answers. One day, Robert decided to return to the beach, hoping for some new clue. To his surprise, he encountered the same man from before. This time, the man seemed more talkative, almost eager to speak. "Back again, huh?" the man said with a knowing smile. Robert nodded. "I need answers." The man's expression turned serious. "There's more to this than you think," he began. Robert felt a mix of excitement and apprehension, sensing he was finally getting somewhere. The man started rambling about an impending disaster, his voice low and urgent. You have no idea what's coming, he said, glancing around nervously. What do you mean? Robert asked, leaning in closer. The man shook his head, as if struggling with how much to reveal. There are hidden truths, dangerous ones, he muttered. Robert's heart raced. You need to be more specific, he insisted. The man sighed heavily, the weight of his words hanging in the air. The conversation deepened, with the man hinting at secrets he was burdened with. I've seen things. Things that shouldn't exist, he confessed, eyes darting to the water. Robert felt a chill. What kind of things? He pressed. The man looked pained, struggling to articulate his thoughts. Secrets the government wants to keep hidden, he finally said. Robert's curiosity grew. Why are you telling me this? The man looked at him intensely. Because someone needs to know the truth. The man suddenly offered to show Robert something crucial. I need to show you something, he said, his tone urgent. Come with me. Robert hesitated, unsure whether to trust him. Why should I? He asked. The man's eyes pleaded. You want answers, don't you? This is the only way. Robert felt torn, but his need for clarity won over. Okay, he agreed cautiously. The man nodded, relief washing over his face. Follow me then, he said. Skeptical yet intrigued, Robert agreed to follow the man in his car. Where are we going? He asked as they walked to the parking lot. The man didn't answer directly, just gestured for Robert to get in his own car. Just follow me, he repeated. Robert started his engine, his mind racing with possibilities. This better be worth it, he thought, as he pulled out behind the man's car. The sense of mystery was stronger than ever. Their drive was silent, with the man largely unresponsive to Robert's questions. Where are we going? Robert asked again, but got no reply. He tried a few more times, each attempt met with the same silence. The man seemed focused, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Robert gripped the steering wheel, his mind racing with possibilities. What am I getting myself into? He wondered. The tension in the car was palpable, each minute stretching endlessly. After what felt like an eternity, they arrived at an unfamiliar secluded location. The dense trees and lack of any visible landmarks made Robert's apprehension grow. The man parked his car and got out, motioning for Robert to follow. Where are we? Robert asked, but the man just started walking. Robert hesitated for a moment before following. The isolation of the place was unnerving, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The man led the way into what appeared to be a restricted zone. We shouldn't be here, Robert muttered, glancing at the warning signs. The man ignored him, pushing forward with a determined stride. They passed several signs that read, No trespassing and Restricted area. Robert's heart pounded as he followed, each step feeling heavier than the last. What's so important that we have to sneak in? He wondered, but the man offered no explanations. They navigated through forbidden territory, marked clearly by warning signs. Robert's anxiety grew with each step. Are you sure about this? He asked, but the man remained undeterred. They walked along a narrow path, surrounded by thick brush and towering trees. The further they went, the more isolated Robert felt. This is crazy, he thought, but something kept him moving forward. The man's determination was contagious, pulling Robert deeper into the unknown territory. As they moved deeper into the restricted zone, Robert couldn't help but question the legality of their actions. We could get into serious trouble for this, he said, trying to slow the man down. The man barely glanced back. We're almost there, he replied, his voice unwavering. Robert sighed, conflicted but still following. What could be so important, he thought. Despite his doubts, he couldn't turn back now. The promise of answers kept him going. As they ventured deeper, Robert realized the gravity of the situation. The air felt heavier, and the silence was almost oppressive. This isn't just some minor secret, he thought, a chill running down his spine. He glanced at the man ahead of him, whose determination never wavered. Whatever this is, it's big, Robert concluded, his steps slowing as the weight of what he was about to uncover pressed down on him. He knew there was no turning back now. He followed reluctantly, aware that he was now part of something significant. Each step felt like a step away from his normal life and into something unknown. Why did I agree to this? He wondered, but he couldn't deny the pull of his curiosity. The man's unwavering resolve pushed him forward. "We're almost there," the man said again, sensing Robert's hesitation. Robert nodded, swallowing his doubts, and continued to follow, feeling the weight of his decision. The man continued forward, hinting they were close to revealing a hidden truth. "Just a bit further," he murmured, glancing back at Robert. Robert could see the intensity in his eyes, a mix of urgency and anticipation. "What truth?" Robert asked, but the man only smiled enigmatically. "You'll see," he replied. The path narrowed, the forest growing denser. Every step seemed to echo with the promise of a revelation. Robert's heart pounded with both fear and excitement. The man finally disclosed his affiliation with an environmental group. "I'm with EcoGuard," he said, his voice low but steady. "We've been tracking illegal activities along this coast." Robert's eyebrows shot up. "Illegal activities? Like what?" he asked. The man looked around, as if expecting to be overheard. "Dumping toxic waste, disturbing marine life," he explained. "The objects you saw are part of it." Robert felt a mix of relief and anxiety. "So, you're trying to stop it?" He explained his mission to expose those responsible for the mysterious sea objects. "We've been gathering evidence," the man said, his voice tinged with determination. "The black residue, the objects, they're all part of illegal dumping by a powerful company." Robert listened, his mind racing. "Why hasn't anyone done anything?" he asked. The man sighed. "Corruption runs deep. We need undeniable proof." Robert felt a new sense of urgency. "So, what's next?" he asked. The man gestured ahead. "Follow me." They reached their destination, where the man prepared to reveal the crucial evidence. "We're here," he said, stopping near a thick grove of trees. He pulled out a small device and pressed a few buttons. Suddenly, a hidden camera feed appeared on a nearby screen. Robert stared, shocked. "This is it," the man said. The footage showed a massive expanse of polluted water. "What is this place?" Robert asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Shocked, Robert was confronted with a massive expanse of polluted water. The scene before him was a stark contrast to the pristine beach he had known. The water was dark, almost black, and filled with swirling patterns of oil. "This is unbelievable," Robert muttered, shaking his head. The man nodded grimly. "It's worse than we thought," he said. Robert felt a surge of anger and sadness. How could they let this happen? He wondered aloud. They stood before a vast, black, oil-filled lake, a stark symbol of environmental neglect. The air was thick with the smell of petroleum, and the sight was almost surreal. "This is what we're fighting against," the man said. Robert felt a knot in his stomach. "How can we fix this?" he asked. The man sighed. "First, we need to expose it." Robert nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Then let's do it," he said. The man explained that the tar balls were a result of illicit oil extraction. They were meant to remain a secret, he said, but by mistake, they ended up in the sea. Robert listened intently, his anger growing. "This was no accident," the man continued. "They've been dumping waste here for years." Robert clenched his fists. "We need to stop them," he said. The man nodded. "That's why I brought you here," he replied. The secrecy of the operation was meant to avoid detection and public outcry. "They've been covering their tracks well," the man said. "No one was supposed to find out." Robert shook his head in disbelief. "But now we know," he said. The man nodded. "Yes, and we have to make sure everyone else knows too." Robert felt a surge of determination. "Let's expose them," he said. The man smiled. "That's the plan," he replied. Armed with evidence, Robert and the man approached the media and authorities. "This is huge," a reporter said, eyes wide with shock. "We need to get this out immediately." The authorities were equally alarmed. "We'll launch an investigation right away," an official promised. Robert felt a sense of relief. "We're finally making progress," he thought. The man nodded in agreement. "This is just the beginning," he said. They watched as the story began to spread. Their exposure led to widespread public outrage and immediate investigative actions. News channels were flooded with images of the polluted lake, and social media buzzed with anger and demands for justice. "This is unacceptable," one protester shouted on TV. The authorities moved quickly, sending teams to the site. "We will hold those responsible accountable," a government spokesperson declared. Robert felt a wave of satisfaction. "We did it," he said to the man. "We're making a difference." The oil company was held accountable, facing severe legal and societal repercussions. "This is just the start of our legal actions," the prosecutor announced. The company's executives were arrested and hefty fines were imposed. "Justice is being served," Robert thought, watching the news unfold. The man nodded, satisfied. "We've done good work," he said. Robert agreed, feeling a sense of closure. "But there's still more to do," he added. The man smiled. "And we will," he replied. Environmental cleanup efforts were initiated, with Robert and the man overseeing. "We need to restore this place," Robert said, watching the cleanup crews at work. Volunteers from the community joined in, eager to help. "Together, we can fix this," the man said, rolling up his sleeves. The transformation was slow but steady. Each day, the polluted water became clearer, and the beach started to look like its old self. Robert felt a sense of hope. The story concluded with the community restoring the beach, symbolizing hope and renewal. "We did it," Robert said, standing on the now clean shore. The man nodded, smiling. "This is what happens when people come together," he said. The community celebrated their success, planting new trees and organizing beach events. Robert watched his kids play in the sand, feeling proud. "We've made a difference," he thought. The beach, once marred by pollution, now stood as a testament to their efforts.